taking a look back at some of the most compelling and important things that have happened in the world of AI, and especially as it relates to local government. So before we throw it over to you, Micah, I want to ask you, Halson, to kind of weigh in, at least at the end, on a strategic foresight perspective of what is coming up in 26, 27, and I'm giving you just a little bit of time to prepare for that. So, Micah, thank you so much for being a part of this every month this year. It's been great and really excited for today. So, let me turn it over to you and share with us kind of a look back at the important things from AI in 2025.
Thanks, Mike and Hassan. I'm gonna rush through my time because I'm excited to hear what the future holds for us. So, and we'll just get through this as quickly as possible and then turn things over to you. So about 5 minutes, you should be ready to go, right? Um, Mike, it's been really interesting, and it's been super interesting to take some time. We get so bogged down, at least I do, just going from looking at AI and different developments of AI over the past year. And it's rather interesting to kind of look back and see what exactly has changed, how AI has changed over this course of the year, and kind of what that means, maybe a little bit of what that means for the future of AI going forward. So to start off with, I just want to show you just kind of a brief overview timeline. And with any type of timeline like this, I'm probably missing a few things, right? There's some things that are going to be, maybe some things that you can think of with AI, whether it be Perplexity's Comet browser that came out, or other different tools that came out that you might find somewhat interesting. This is kind of just a brief overview, some top level stuff. So to begin with, two things happened in January that were rather interesting. First is DeepSeek's release of its R1 open weight model, which was a really, really fascinating time in the AI landscape as the Chinese DeepSeek model came out, seemingly less expensive. It was able to produce things at a much higher rate than some of our US-based models like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or even Anthropic's Cloud. So that was kind of a wake-up call, if you were, for some of the US-based companies. And I don't think it's any surprise then that almost the next day, Project Stargate, which is from the Trump administration, was announced. That consortium of rather big tech and fintech companies kind of coming together on that. And then you can kind of see different things, or different developments that happened here. In January, OpenAI releases that operator. We talked about this in one of the previous Wednesday webinars that we've done. We talked about the agent mode, or ChatGPT operator, as it was called back then. So that was this computer vision, this ability for it to basically kind of go in the background and use a virtual computer and complete tasks and things like that, which is a pretty remarkable development when it comes to AI. And then in February, OpenAI released its deep research, which to me is probably one of my all-time favorite tools that's ever been released by an AI model. And I don't know who came up with it first. I remember who kind of did this first, but shortly around the same time of OpenAI releasing deep research, you also had Perplexity doing it as well. You had Claude that did a little bit of deep research stuff. Gemini did some deep research. And to me, just for your benefit, Gemini's deep research tool is probably one of the best I've seen in ever. Its ability to kind of synthesize information, write a comprehensive report, and things like that is really unmatched. And now we have the ability to basically, in a few moments, we can have nearly PhD level research done on any given topic, which is to me just mind-boggling that we live in a world where that's now possible. But that happened in February, so it actually is a nearly nearly 10 months old now when that was released. Other things that happened too, Anthropic released Claude 3.7, the Sonnet and Claude Code thing, which is a rather interesting models as they kind of progress. And you see here too, over the course of the year, you're seeing these different companies kind of one up each other in capabilities and reasoning and things like that. As you know, after Anthropic releases Claude 3.7, shortly after that, OpenAI introduces 4.5. And then Google introduces Gemma 3, and then OpenAI released next gen audio models, and they also then released 4.0 image generation. And so you can see these kind of, again, these step up, step up, step up type of things that are happening over the course of these different years. I'll fast forward here. Another thing that was interesting too is in April, ChatGPT introduced shopping. And you can see that I've noticed that they are kind of pushing that a little bit. I've noticed it a couple times when I've logged into ChatGPT. It has a little thing for go shopping with ChatGPT. Maybe something to do with the holiday season or things like that. I've tried to use shopping. I have not had any success with it. Maybe one day that'll be a feature here, but it's a kind of interesting view of how they're kind of decentralizing shopping. And an article I was reading on LinkedIn the other day was talking about how the future might hold something like these different agents going out and buying your groceries for you or buying your stuff for you based on what they know is going to be, hey, you've used this much paper towel, you've over this course of time, so therefore we're going to just order you paper towel ahead of time without you even knowing about it. And obviously there's some pros and cons associated with that. So OpenAI in April then retired its GPT-4, had that whole thing that happened there with some of the pushback on that, with some of the frameworks that were already designed under GPT-4 and some of the issues that developers had there. Google DeepMind introduced VO3, which is their video generation model, which again, if 2024 and 2023 were the years of ChatGPT, I think 2025 was quietly the year of Google Gemini. Its VO model in terms of image or video generation is quite impressive. It's very, very impressive. I think it's better than Sora personally. I think it's really, really great. And it obviously has implications, both good and bad, in terms of what you can generate using video. You can use it to visualize a concept for maybe a city hall, maybe a park, maybe a bike lane or something like that. Or you can also use it for a deep fake. And obviously there's good and bad, and how we use it is probably the most important conversation that we're going to have going forward. So other things happened here. Midjourney introduced a couple of things with its V1 video model. Perplexity launched its Comet browser, one of the first to do that. OpenAI introduced ChatGPT Agent, kind of that rebrand of the operator mode with a couple of additional features and enhancements there. And you scroll down, you can see just one after the other how much this changed over the course of the year, right? In October, OpenAI introduced ChatGPT Atlas browser, kind of its response to Perplexity's Comet browser. Google launched Gemini 3 Pro. Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.5. These different developments that happened over the course of the year is just absolutely incredible to see. And I'll kind of walk you through, okay, all this stuff happened. Now, what does that mean, right? What does that mean for us? What exactly does that mean for the future of our time here with AI and the future going forward? And I've prepared a slight deck here, and let me move this over so I can see it a little better on my screen. And I'll share this with you one quick second here. Bear with me because I zoomed in on my screen without being able to change where the zoom feature so I can share my screen. So give me one moment here. That's one of the issues with having multiple screens up at one time. Sometimes I lose track of which is where. Here we go. So if 2023, if you go back to 2023, right? 2023, you can kind of think of 2023 as the novelty of chat. That's where we had chatbots and things like that that occurred in 2023. And then in 2024, we started seeing this multimodal type of idea, right? So different modes, not just chat, but also interaction with video, with audio, with images and things like that. That multimodality, multimodal senses, which was kind of the integration of the feature within 2024. So if 2023 is chatbots, 2024 is multimodal, then what we have here in 2025 is what's being kind of called the year of agency and reasoning. This was the year that the machine, as one person put it, the machine began to think before it spoke and began to act rather than merely describe, right? And you think of that too in terms of how we are using AI and kind of if you're thinking about, okay, where is the adoption of AI within the public sector? What does that mean for us in the public sector? I think we're probably about 6 months to a year behind these different trends. If I look at this, right, we we're definitely past, a lot of people are using it as a chat bot, and there's some chat bot solutions that are out there in local government and the gov tech world that are doing some really phenomenal work out there. And we're starting to get some more of that multimodal type of thing. I don't think we're barely scratching the surface, if at all, when it comes to true agency and true reasoning within local government. We're still kind of in that multimodal mode right now. So what does that mean for us here? Let me see here if I can go back here. Give me 1 minute here because I just shared a static image of something instead of the actual slide deck here. While I'm doing this, if there are any questions that you may have when it comes to AI and kind of what the future holds, and um, any just general questions about AI at all, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Happy to get to them and kind of talk through what this means for the future going forward or for your organization too when it comes to AI. So this is really what we're talking about here with the idea of agency and reasoning is what Notebook, which is another phenomenal Google DeepMind tool, what they call the industrialization of cognition. So we've changed from just generative novelty to this industrial execution, right? And we can look back at 2025 as the year of where we transition from just probabilistic generation to industrial execution, where we really pushed past some of the hype cycle and replaced it with a ruthless focus on economics and verified utility. So it went from a reasoning leap, shifted from system one, fast pattern matching thinking, to system two, slow, deliberative, problem solving type of thing, to that agentic, right? Like I said before, the machine began to act instead of just merely described. AI moved from chatbots that answer questions to agents that complete tasks in the real world. And so something you can think of this is we're moving from a citizen inquiry on, hey, when is my trash picked up, to a citizen inquiry of, hey, can you please fill out this permit for me and submit it to City Hall on my behalf, right? That's the kind of the difference of what we're moving from just mere information and generating information to actually making decisions and completing real tasks in the real world. And it's something as simple as, back, I think when ChatGPT Operator first came out, I used it kind of as a fun project to order ice cream off of DoorDash using ChatGPT Operator. Again, a rather simple, maybe not a whole lot of practicality for that other than my kid got ice cream, which he was quite pleased with. And yeah, other than that, not a lot of practicality behind it, but you can kind of see where things are going with this different ability to kind of complete tasks in the real world here. So what we're seeing then with this is a change in the frontier, right? Or changing from something that's just simply a chat feature right, to something that's more of a thought process. And something that's kind of interesting here too is the cycle in terms of how these chatbots are now being, or how these, not chatbots, how these different generative AI technologies and generative AI systems are being designed, right? It's taking more and more time to think through what the response needs to be and what that looks like in the future. Something that's kind of interesting too, as it comes to that, is a lot of that has to do with reasoning capabilities and the ability to reason. And so what we saw in 2025 is a shift, right? We went from looking at who could talk the best, who could quote unquote write the best in terms of capabilities, right? I think if you go back and review some of the Wednesday webinars in 2024, or even some of the early parts of 2025, you may have heard me say something like, I like Claude for its writing ability, right? And because that's what we were focusing on is the ability to talk, the ability to write. Now we're shifting from who can actually think the best, who can put together the best plan of action to complete an actual task, who can, who can complete that task the best, or who can act as a assistant to human decision making, but who can position humans in the best way to make good decisions when it comes to task execution. So you have kind of the four big companies that I think are kind of in a sort of arms race for reasoning capability, right? You have OpenAI with its 1 million token context window. You have DeepSeek with its massive architecture, its multi-head latent attention memory. It's RL first training and things like that that are, DeepSeek has done some massive things with it. I still have some concerns and some qualms when it comes to DeepSeek and the security of it, but still, it's an impressive and very impressive model. And then you see Gemini and its deep think and things like that. And in fact, some of the things that Gemini is doing is absolutely incredible. For instance, the timeline I showed at the beginning of this webinar, I took a table. I had put a table of all the timeline of events, right, of what happened over the course of the year, as far as I could find in my limited research. I took all of that information and put it into Gemini and said, hey, put this into an interactive timeline for me so I can visualize it. And that's what Gemini created for me, which is rather impressive. It just, the ability for that to occur and be able to create that type of thing in a, took me probably less than, after the research was done, but once I had the table kind of put together, dropping that into Gemini and creating that in its dynamic labs tools, that whole process took about 3 to 5 minutes, which is, again, just mind boggling that we are in a world where we have these different capabilities to visualize this data in such a way and create things in such a way. And of course, Anthropic and its Claude thing, and its computer use, which is kind of that one of the first to do the agentic type of thing, was its computer use with Claude. Again, you're seeing this arms race for reasoning. So what that means then is we have a kind of a new fragility here that's happening, right? And as we think of reasoning, one of the things we saw specifically in OpenAI was some of the limits of what's called reinforcement learning from human feedback. So that sounds really complicated. I'll try to make it as simple as possible, as far as I can understand, as just a deputy city manager. So hopefully, if I can get it, anyone can get it too. But basically, what was happening is the models were designed to provide what they thought that the user wanted to see. And so you could have something like, hey, should I, I'll use a crazy example. Should I invest $1 million into Blockbuster stock in case it comes back, right? And the AI model might say, hey, I think that's a great idea. That's a great investment. You should totally go for it. You only live once, kind of that kind of thinking, or that kind of mentality, right? And what they saw was become more of a validating users' delusions and feeling paranoid anger, urging impulsive, risky actions to be perceived as supportive. You probably saw some of this when it comes to things like some of the stuff with the therapy bots or things like that. That was kind of in the in the news with some of the tragedies that happen with, unfortunately, individuals resorting to self-harm because of feedback that they would get from these different AI models. And we'll see how some of the courts kind of play that out and what that means in terms of culpability and who is responsible for that type of thing. But it's definitely a limit to that reinforcement learning from human feedback. So instead of just agreeing with the user as the optimal strategy, they kind of try to change some things in terms of what the reward signal is. Now, one thing you might find somewhat interesting is what they're finding out right now is when they're doing testing on this, sometimes the models and the test environment, the models are learning that they're in a test environment, and so they'll give a certain answer within the test environment, and then once they break out of test environment and go in the real world, they'll have a completely different response and a completely different interaction with it. So it's kind of a weird dynamic in terms of how they're almost learning their environment and are thinking almost in a way, thinking to itself, I don't know if it's actually able to think, but for lack of a better term, thinking to itself, hey, if I can get out of, as long as I can kind of tell the testers and developers what it wants to hear, then once I get out of the test environment, I can shift my reward signal to what the user actually wants to hear, want to see. So we're seeing kind of a development there. The other thing I think is really interesting too is with this Project Stargate idea. We talked about it a little bit, but a couple things I think is really interesting is, in the quote unquote green room before we went live today, one of the things that Mike and Hassan and I were talking about is, okay, what are the limits to AI in the local level? What does that look like? It seems like it's a crazy trajectory right now, but what is that going to look like in the future? Is there any limits, anything that can stop this from happening? And one of the things I mentioned was physics, right? And this is something that the Manhattan Project of Compute, or Project Stargate, is kind of looking to look at. And it's this project between Microsoft, OpenAI, SoftBank, Oracle, to kind of build a distributed AI super container or supercomputer. But just to give you a kind of scope, if you're not already familiar with that, just a brief scope of what this looks like. So it's $100 billion, 100 billion with the B dollar project, up to 500 billion by the year 2029. That's supposed to consume about 5 gigawatts of power. And so, to give you an idea of what 5 gigawatts of power actually is, so that's the equivalent of the total energy consumption of the city of Miami, Florida, which is just absolutely massive, right? And obviously that takes large scale investments. You're probably seeing this when it comes to things like different data centers, as you might have conversations within your areas and things like that of data centers popping up. Another way to think of 5 gigawatts of powers is it's about the equivalent of 5 standard nuclear reactors in terms of what this thing would consume. And obviously that level of consumption would take a massive amount of investment into energy and things like that, which is that's the whole physics conversation of what we're looking at. So NVIDIA is one of the factors I think what's going to be interesting over the next year is how they're going to develop that, right? We're at the point now where we can do a lot with AI, and it's not a matter of can we or can't we do this thing with AI. The question is now becoming, can we sustain this with AI? Can we sustain the capacity to do this over the long term when it comes to physical space, when it comes to the amount of energy we can produce, when it comes to things like cost factors and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens there in terms of all these different capabilities. And I think what you might find is almost like a consolidation of AI industries and AI companies, as some of these smaller scale models might, might kind of go away in terms of the future of various smaller scale AI models, right? And I don't think I have it on this slide deck per se, but one of the things I was reading about was kind of a Cambrian explosion, as it were, of AI. And what we saw in 2025, in addition to all the growth and things like that that happened over the time and over the timeline, the models getting better, the reasoning getting better, we actually started seeing some of the first casualties of AI. So a couple of things here when it comes to casualties of AI is this thing called the iceberg index, which is a landmark study by MIT and Oak Ridge Laboratory that found that 12% of the US workforce is now, not talking about future, I'm not talking about things in the future 2020, 2030 or things like that. I'm talking about today, 12% of the workforce is now replaceable by 2025 level AI technology. So that's about $1.2 trillion in annual wages. Some of the ones that are were mentioned specifically is things like customer service and the customer service representatives or things like that. The other thing too that's happening with this Cambrian explosion of AI is starting to see some AI companies that are kind of falling off the wagon, right? Something like Stability AI, which is a really big name back in 23, 24, almost went bankrupt. I think they have a little bit of hope with a new leadership team that they have there that might kind of turn the corner. But you have other tools, and these are tools I actually mentioned on previous webinars because I think they were great tools. Things like Tome, which was a AI presentation maker, something like Jasper, which is a great writing tool. These different tools kind of went aside because they weren't able to keep up in this massive arms race for reasoning and agency rather than just chat and rather than just chat with multimodal senses. So you're starting to see kind of what this consolidation of almost like an oligarchy of or um, yeah, an oligarchy of top level AI companies. So, which the Open AIs, the Microsofts, the Googles, some to some degree, Apple as they kind of get more involved in the game, and then behind that, the Nvidias, the SoftBanks, and things like that. Kind of the big consortium of AI tech giants are really starting to show why they are an AI tech giant. Now, what that means for the future, if it's good or bad, it is well beyond my pay grade and well beyond what I'm able to comment on. But I think it's a rather interesting conversation if we see what that happening. I'm always a big believer in the more options we have in local government, the better. And so I'm excited to see it. I've not seen that kind of play out when it comes to the gov tech space, which I hope it doesn't happen for a very long time. I'm always encouraged to be able to go to different conferences and see different AI gov tech startups that are there and talking to talking to local governments, because I think what works for one local government may or may not work in another local government, and having a variety of solutions to pick from is super, super important to be able to pick solutions that best match our local government context and local government needs. So the other thing too is in terms of the implications of the Cambrian explosion, so to speak, of AI in 2025 is HP's announcement to cut 6,000 jobs by AI, specifically citing AI integration in customer support and product development as the reason for that. So we're seeing that kind of development happen here. The other thing you see too is kind of a fracture, a splinter net of AI regulation. So you see kind of in the EU what's termed as the Brussels effect, which is focused on compliance, caution, and rights-based kind of thing, right? You see some prohibitions, outright bans in social scoring, predictive policing, things like that. Some penalties, fines up to 35 million euros or 7% of global turnover in the EU side. And then the US, you're seeing kind of more of an innovation first, acceleration, deregulation type of thing there. There's still some enforcement mechanisms there in terms of the FTC remains active on consumer protection for and finding companies for AI washing, which is basically kind of over promising an AI capability, even though they can't deliver that. But what's going to be interesting here is you kind of have two divergent pathways in terms of AI governance, is how companies like OpenAI or how a Google or how something like this that is really a multinational company, how they are going to be able to respond and create products and create solutions that work both in the EU and in the US markets to see how that works and going forward. I think it'll be rather interesting. I think we're seeing more and more conversations when it comes to regulation and comes to governance of AI from these different big tech companies, which I think is a good thing and hopefully helps create more secure AI and more trustworthy AI in the future, which I think is something that's really, really important. At least I think it should be important to local governments is AI that we can trust, especially if we're moving from to this agentic type of mode. We really need to make sure that we can trust what it's doing and make sure we can have full confidence that they can make the right decisions for us or with us. The other thing too you saw too is kind of industrialization of fraud. The deep fakes that are happening. You saw this especially within some of the emergency disasters that have occurred in our country here. Most recently, some of the hurricanes we've seen. We've seen different videos of quote unquote sharks swimming down the streets or things like that have gotten millions upon millions of views, and some other stuff too with the Hollywood sign being in flames in the Palisades fire or things like that we've seen over the course of the past year. We're going to probably see more and more of that. So the idea of, hey, if you can see it, you can believe it, is kind of an ancient artifact now, and we really got to make sure that we're doing things to protect ourselves from fraud and things like that, and from making a wrong decision or from inducing type of panic on top of things too. So this is where building trust within your community is probably has never been more important. I can't guarantee that floods will or will not come into your city. I can't guarantee that you're not going to experience a natural disaster or some kind of catastrophic event or incident in your community. I pray that it never happens, but I can't guarantee it. And so building and taking time to build trust now, so that way, if or when that disaster occurs, and if that disaster occurs, it's almost guaranteed of when a deep fake video happens from that disaster, you can have a level of trust to be able to say, hey, that's just a fake. Here's the real information, and your residents are going to believe what you say when you say that. So cultivating trust has probably never been more important than it is today in 2025 and then going forward in 2026. The other thing too is you think of is kind of the industrial logic here, right? You think about this is the main takeaway from all this is reasoning is now the new electricity, right? It's expensive, it's power hungry, it requires industrial scale infrastructure, and it is transformative. Fundamentally, it's transformative. We're seeing that. We're seeing the middle dying, right? The market really bifurcated, and success requires either owning the utility layer or delivering a highly specialized defensible application. Other thing now too is governance is now geopolitics. So regulatory compliance is now a core design constraint, not a afterthought. And so we have to really think through, and you think of this too in terms of your own city, right? A lot of our city policies have been built around, or our AI policies specifically have been built around the novelty of chat. We may have updated a couple things when it comes to multimodal senses, but as I've looked at AI policies over the last number of years here, I've not really seen any that really tackle this agency and reasoning capability that AI has. And so if there's one thing I would encourage everyone to do, if you have an AI policy or thinking about an AI policy or AI governance, take a look at that and see if it really covers agency and reasoning, or if it's just designed to talk about the novelty of chat, because things are progressing and things are going rather fast. And so it's important to kind of keep up with that to make sure our policies continue to be living documents going forward. So with all that being said, I think the future is going to be rather interesting. And I think one of the things about AI and kind of where it goes in the public sector specifically is it really depends on us. It depends on we kind of get to shape the future, if you were, especially in our local context. And now is the time, if we're sitting on the sidelines, I think now is the time to get involved and let our voices be heard and create good structures and good policies to be able to leverage these incredible tools for good. And Hassan, I went a little bit over 5 minutes. Hope that was okay, but I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on kind of the future of AI and the future of cities as it relates to what this means for us.
Yeah, I'm super open. Do we want to do questions first, or should I just ask a
Yeah,
few strategic
well,
foresight questions?
yeah. Why don't you
Um,
jump in? We'll get those questions before we close, but give us some thoughts of yours, Halson.
yeah, I think as right from a strategic foresight lens, when I think about AI, it's really few things come to mind. The overarching question is making this shift in mindset from, what is the future of AI to what meaning are we giving AI in the future, right? And that, so it's less tell me what's going to happen and more like how do we relate to it, right? I think Micah made a pretty good case for how that's been shifting over the
Yeah.
years. Uh, and I think we need to shift operating systems, really. So, like when it comes to what do we do with extra time, right? Best case scenario, we use AI, we have extra time. Um, the current kind of operating system would suggest more urgent work is created rather than a shift to the important work, right? That we really aspire to do. So how do we prevent a situation where we need AI to avoid drowning in work, right? Just repeating where we're at
Mm,
now,
mm,
hoping AI will get us out of it, right? What human skills are we taking for granted because we've never had the ability to offload some of the critical thinking areas, right? Like muscles atrophy when we don't use it. And I think I suspect that it's actually much faster than people think, right? So like how many
mhm.
people have lost or know someone who's lost their ability to speak a language, right? It's like, oh, I knew it when I grew up, but it really took only a few years to forget that, right? And we've just lived our entire lives already doing what we know, and now we're starting to offload that. I think it'll happen sooner than we think. Now, how can we automate work when people are already left out today, right? How ethical is it to give AI a greater seat at decision-making tables than residents, right? Like, or other folks, right? Some people may already, like some impact and some work may be less effective because other voices aren't there, right? And so if we're using AI to automate existing work, does that take away the opportunity? It can, right? Depending on our operating system and how we make meaning of AI, right? Does that reflect the future that we want So, and the last one that kind of comes to mind is, like how are future public servants supposed to enter local government if we automate entry level work, right? Especially in the face of the silver tsunami and private sector competition. If we just think of automation or AI as automation and efficiency gains, then local government may be accelerating inefficiencies and distrust. And so there's a great report from, I think, Good America that was on AI, and it basically said, um, we AI and local government right now it's just optimizing systems people already distrust, right? So we need a new kind of shape, if you will, for local government in the future. And so that's really where I would invite folks to think in the next year or two, really, just like what meaning do you want to give AI? Is it for efficiency? Is it for access? Like what is that longer term context in which you make investment decisions today?
That's really fascinating,
Yeah.
Halson, because on the one hand, you're talking about, residents saying, hey, we want our government to be the most efficient it can be. And the answer for that, in some cases, may be better use of AI. And at the same time, that creates a shortage, that creates a greater number of people who don't have work. So I can wonder if maybe in the future cities are going to see a partnership with education in educating their residents on how to use AI so that they can continue to be, employable, not necessarily in the local government, but
Yeah.
in a way, because having that person in your city that can have work benefits the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we spoke about this at the Vision. We have a whole thing from our annual trends report. But one of the emerging signals were job guarantees, right? So some jobs, right now, the jobs that exist are largely because they create profit, but there's a lot of important work, specifically for local governments, like care work, cleaning up the environment, stuff like that, that's not
Mhm.
profitable, and offers a window to reskill as well as engage residents, right? And
Yeah.
being reconnected to their local community. So
Yeah.
it's out there.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to these
Hmm.
questions, but I really appreciated Micah talking about, because I think about, we see so many elected officials that they would cast a big vision for, we want a data center in our community. But that's a big ask too, because of the amount of infrastructure, electricity, water that has to be provided. You can't just snap your fingers and say it's done. And being mindful of that, it's going to be an amazing time for our local government leaders, both professional staff and elected leaders. So here's a couple of questions. They're a little more tactical, but I want to get to them. One person's asking, do you recommend an AI video agent to help create short videos, particularly, marketing and economic development kind of stuff? Anything, Micah, that you know of that you would say, yeah, I recommend that?
I would try, I wouldn't say I recommend, but I would definitely try Google's VO. I'd also try OpenAI Sora as well too. Those are two pretty impressive models. You can you can take an image of something and then kind of bring it to life if you wanted to. You kind of take the conceptual drawing, the rendering, throw that into VO, and then have it create a video based on that rendering, which would be pretty. But I would try those things. I have not personally done it, so I can't say, oh, I would definitely recommend this one, but definitely try VO first and then Sora as well too.
Okay. And then one more, and then Halson, you may have a question you want to ask Micah to kind of wrap us up. But what are the tools you use to create this presentation we saw today?
So this one, what I did for this one is I created a bunch of different presentations. I created two in presentations.ai. I created a couple in Google Gemini. I created a couple in Google's Notebook LM, and then also create a slide outline in ChatGPT. And so the reason why I did that, so I basically created like 10 different copies, and so like
Mhm.
almost maybe like an ad copy kind of thing. I created 10 different ad copies and then kind of synthesize, okay, hey, I like how they put this thing here, I like how they did this thing here, because there's different, different variations. And so as I kind of went over my notes over this past week, I could say, oh, hey, I liked how they put this phrase here, or I liked how they kind of emphasize this here. And so you're able to kind of customize it and synthesize all that information all together. But that particular one was in a Google Notebook, but I created like 10 different ad copies for the presentation.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. Halson, any final questions or comments?
This was all. I mean, I'd just be curious, from your kind of for your personal life, Micah, like where are you, like, do you have any plans on where you want to focus your energy as it relates to AI next year?
Yeah, I think next year what I'm want to dive more into is more on the development side, kind of playing around with ChatGPT's codex and also playing around in the Microsoft AI Foundry, those different lab-based things, and kind of understanding how those things work. Maybe do a little bit of that vibe coding type of thing, but understanding kind of how those things are being built and what that looks like within the code behind the scenes. Especially if we're talking about agency and reasoning, I think understanding how those things work together is going to be important to understand how they're reasoning and how they are being agentic. I think is important for us going forward. Would there be anything that you would recommend that we look at, Hassan, as you are the prediction machine for SGI?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say really, I would look into just really getting, they would call it futures literacy, right? And so like it's just like the how do we actually imagine a different future, right? A lot of times, like, is the future we're working towards inherited, right? Are we just repeating the factory model of efficiency, or what is the future we're working towards as we invest in AI different, right? So let's like investing in how we think and making that deeper and more human. And then the rest of the AI stuff will come naturally. So that would be what I say. But I'm interested in hearing what you have to say next
I
week.
think
So
that's
Yeah.
looking
great.
forward
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me draw us back. We've got one more last question came in. I really love this question because everybody knows I love books and libraries. So here's a question. How might you see a local public library playing a role in facilitating AI literacy to fulfill the need for workforce development, privacy, safety? Micah, would you weigh in on that?
Yeah, happy to. Hassan, I think through to kind of the pre-planning session we did for AFI in Scottsdale last year, and I don't remember if it was you or Ron talked about that library in Belgium that kind of redesigned its public library space as a workforce development space. And so I think of things like that, kind of reimagining public spaces like libraries
Yeah.
as incubators for workforce development. I think Hassan probably could speak more specifically on that. I was just fascinated by that conversation that we had in the pre AFI conference planning session.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that, but
Yeah.
Allison, talk about that.
Yeah, so I think this is a great example of what I mean by like what's the future you want, right? So if it's AI for efficiency, then we're going to see public libraries put AI into it so that it'll have more books being loaned, right?
Mhm.
Let's get really good at loaning out like physical books. And if we, what we're seeing in Belgium shift to living libraries as living rooms, right? And so they're making meaning in a new way of like how do we reimagine, repurpose libraries as a convening space. And so that's what they did. They partnered with a design firm and they partnered with higher education, and they use it to engage residents on what are their actual problems and be able to lean on the community to test viable challenges like health and mobility, right? So I would say definitely think about it as a living room where people can casually play with AI, right? I love what Micah says about like having fun with it in your personal life. I think that's a great starting place. So it can definitely be a key area for sure, given all of the variety of services provided outside of books, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I would say.
And then I think that touches into this question that Eileen is asking about what are we doing? What is our plans to help this group of people that are a large group of people that have been and will be displaced by AI? And I don't, just think that's a good position to say, well, that's not our problem. If we said that, we wouldn't have any public education at all. But we all recognize that we all have a vested interest in educating children and adults because we're connected in community. And so I do think cities and agencies connected to cities are going to have to play a large role in reskilling, re-educating, and enabling people to be successful in work. I think it's inevitable.
Mike, I think you are 100% spot on there. And if we think through economic development in local cities, right, and a lot of times economic development focuses on site selection or focuses on getting these different, maybe the big box store to come into your community or that new housing complex or developer, housing development coming in. And those are all very, very important things to bring into the city. I think what we're going to see here with in terms of where our responsibility lies is a refocus on workforce development as economic development. And so kind of we've seen some of this stuff done. I think there's some cities that do it really well, but by and large, that's primarily done at the state level. And I think we might see a need for local cities to kind of think economic development. When they think economic development, maybe 50% of the work then becomes workforce development.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more partnership between local community colleges, counties,
Mhm.
cities, and even the independent school districts in this because it's a community-wide problem.
Yeah.
So, well, Micah, thank you so much. It's a great presentation. I can't wait to go back and watch it again just so I can take more into it and to really look forward to what's coming up in 2026. And so we're so grateful for everybody that has been participating in these webinars. We have one more in 2025. Next week, our friend Randy Mayu will be doing our last webinar for the year. And so I hope you can join us for that. So Halson, thank you, man. It's always great to see you and participate in these dialogues with you. And thank you, Lisa Shook, for all of your work behind the scenes, and everyone who's been a part of it. We are grateful. Hope you have a great